They've seen this movie before and they don't like how it ends.
One of the greatest opportunity zones for the United States lies right next door in Latin America. Today's guest, Ballard partner Pepe Diaz, knows that better than most. He's not only represented Floridians, but worked with companies and industries across and beyond the Southern Hemisphere. His views are widely followed, and his take on changing trends among Hispanics in America is must-reading. From Ballard Studios in West Hollywood, California, it's 13th and Park.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
That often is missing in politics.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
It's a nightmare.
Those are the facts.
We have to solve everything.
What's in this tea?
Well, Pepe, great to have you on the show. Great to have you all the way from Florida out here in our Los Angeles studio digs. Kind of cool, right?
What a beautiful place. You guys have done an outstanding job. It's like amazing to watch the growth of 13th and Park in Washington and LA. We just need to now open up a Miami office.
Well, let's talk about Latin America. Let's start there, okay? Which is a land of untapped potential, I think, especially for the United States of America. What do you believe our potential is there, and what should the new administration be looking to do to generate stronger relationships in a place where I think we've been relatively absent?
It's kind of beyond me that Latin America has not been a bigger focus for the United States, especially in the Biden years. Our closest neighbor, Mexico and Canada, and happen to be our biggest trade partners. Mm-hmm. It's also our biggest vulnerability. At the end of the day, this border crisis became a hotbed topic during the election because everybody knew just how impactful irregular migration is for the future of this country. And China has seen that better than just about anybody.
Right.
They've invested billions of dollars trying to win Latin America over. And so it's become a proxy battle between the United States and Canada. So I think that the next 4 years of the Trump administration are really going to help dictate the next decade or two of Latin American policy.
Well, when you look across Latin America and you say, where is America strongest in its relationships, starting even with Central America? The two of us had a number of experiences, you more so obviously in Guatemala, which has expressed incredible support for the United States. And yet it seems like there was a bit of the Heisman maneuver at times between this nation and them. And then you look at the rest of the Latin America and you're hard pressed to find a country, take Mexico off to the side for a second, that really would stand tall with us for the future.
Yeah. And look, I can't explain it, right? I mean, I have seen it. I've observed it. I've done a lot of business in Latin America, and I see the potential. I see the desire to be part of the conversation.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think in the last 4 years, what we've seen is a total ignoring of Latin America, almost like, we're distracted elsewhere. We're distracted in Ukraine. We're distracted in Russia. We're distracted in the Middle East. And yet we're forgetting our next door neighbor. And the only time that they hear from us is when we're punching them in the nose and, wagging our finger at them, letting them know that, we don't like how you did this, or we don't like that you appointed this attorney general,
right,
or we don't like that you are having this bilateral agreement with this country. It's like, this relationship should be a two-way relationship. And I think that one thing that gives me a lot of hope for Latin America is the nomination of Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. I mean, that guy was created in a laboratory for this. He is smart. He's dedicated. He has so much experience in Latin America, born to Cuban-American parents. So he's seen the struggle for democracy all over the region, and he's fought for freedom in Nicaragua and Venezuela and Cuba. And we're starting to see a little bit of a shift to the right in countries, like President Milei getting elected in Argentina.
In Argentina, it's exciting, right?
It's exciting. And I think seeing other figures like a Bukele in El Salvador and what he's doing are going to inspire opposition to current regimes to step up their game.
Well, certainly Marco Rubio has a worldview. Been on the show.
Absolutely.
And expressed his worldview, which is fascinating. But he does have a particular focus and expertise in Latin America. Stands to reason, right? So by prioritizing that, maybe for the first time in forever, I think this country has a chance to revitalize relationships and be able to improve things like nearshoring. We're sitting here at a time when more and more of our critical assets are becoming priorities for America and for Americans. They're really top of mind. It goes well beyond energy, goes into other vital assets that when they're produced half a world away in China or India, it feels like we have less control over it as opposed to nearshoring, which at least on the principle of it is to have things produced and controlled closer to home.
Look, I think post-COVID, the awareness of supply chains and just how important they are and how much of our critical supply chain is controlled by China, it really scared us straight, and it focused us and made us at least start a conversation with some of our southern neighbors about, moving manufacturing there. We have lost a lot of manufacturing jobs in the United States. I don't know if we're ever going to get them back, but we definitely could bring them to Costa Rica and Panama and Mexico. And I think that that's going to become part of a larger conversation. It's hard to talk about Latin America and not talk about migration. I think a lot of Trump's policies will be directly tied to how compliant and cooperative a country might be on curbing irregular migration.
Right.
And we're seeing that already. I mean, illegal immigration is one thing. The problem with narco trafficking and fentanyl and the bringing in of all these drugs from China through South America is something that should keep all parents up at night, right? We have young kids that are doing drugs that are laced with fentanyl and they're dying every day. And that doesn't go away if the United States doesn't have a firm hand, if the United States doesn't take control back and it doesn't get the cooperation of other countries. So there is a golden opportunity here, one, to re-engage with our neighbors, but also help them help us and help them want to help us, because unfortunately we've ignored them for so long that it's going to be like a reintroduction of sorts.
Does it start as simply as showing up, developing relationships, showing you care, showing you're there for them is as important as any policy, as any program that you're proposing? It is that human connection that shows you care because you took the time to show up.
Listen, when Vice President Harris was appointed as a designee in all things Northern Triangle, the Central America was dying for her to come visit, and she just didn't. And there was a stark contrast to Trump land when, Carlos Trujillo was OAS ambassador, and he was spending significant time traveling the Caribbean and South and Central America and meeting with dignitaries and letting them know we're here and getting involved by listening. It's like any relationship. It's only as good as your ability to listen to the other side. This isn't only about you pounding your chest and saying, we are the great America, listen to us roar. We're neighbors. We have mutual enemies. We have mutual friends. We have similar issues. If we don't start seeing ourselves as a world community, I really fear for the future of our children and our grandchildren, because the issues we're dealing with are global and hemispheric. If Argentina has a cold, if Brazil has a cold, the United States is going to suffer and we're going to feel it. So, we've obviously spent a lot of time and energy in the last couple decades focusing on the bigger countries, Chile and Argentina and Brazil and Mexico. But there's a lot of smaller countries that have a lot of potential. One of the true success stories of the hemisphere is going to be Guyana and what happens there with all the natural resources that they found. I mean, that could potentially be a dramatic game changer for the economic future of Northern South America.
Right.
So we're going to be in a very, very unique opportunity to make a difference. And I think that, again, we're going to see some pretty big names be appointed in the coming months. January 20th is the inauguration of Donald Trump, but it's also the beginning of what will be a total reshaping of Latin American policy in the Western Hemisphere. And I think that there's going to be some great stories that are going to be shared by, generations to come if we do this right.
And great economic opportunities for American business, right?
Yeah, look, right. The last Trump administration, they came up with a program called América Crece, which means growth in America. And the thought was, right now, there's critical infrastructure needs all over Latin America. I mean, to the tune of $150 billion a year. And the only way that we can see a stronger, better Latin America is to have the private sector get involved. So, the Trump administration started entering into these bilateral agreements with a majority of South America. And these agreements started to see immediate results. And unfortunately, that was all hit with a 2,000-pound brick that was COVID. COVID really made us all retreat and come back and introspect and worry about ourselves. But, COVID is behind us. We need to now, restart those programs. Maybe America Crece becomes something else, but certainly I think it was a step in the right direction. It's something that we should continue.
So let's shift to politics. Can't help ourselves,
Love it,
right?
love
politics. Hispanic politics in particular, Pepe. I mean, you saw President-elect Trump garner approximately 45% of the Hispanic vote, record. There's a record for him, and a huge sea change, especially among working class Hispanics. And you saw it even more close up in Miami-Dade County, which went for Donald Trump. He's the first Republican for president that has carried Miami-Dade. Why the shift? And is that a permanent shift, or is that something that could be even reversed if the Democratic Party were to kind of wake up and say, oh my gosh, let's figure out what happened to us and what we need to do to compete?
Well, I think that the biggest problem that, the Hispanic vote has faced in the last couple decades is the thought that it's monolithic, right?
Yeah.
I would say the Democratic Party for too long thought that, just focusing on immigration and saying that, we're going to have a path to citizenship and, try to help immigrants out was enough.
Mm-hmm.
The Cuban population is totally different than the Venezuelan population, and they have different issues than the Colombian population and the Mexican-American population, which, by the way, it doesn't matter if you're Mexican-American living in Ohio, if you're living on the border towns, you're seeing huge numbers of those people that are being affected by irregular migration come towards the Republican side. Do I think it's permanent? I don't think it's permanent. Nothing is permanent in this world. But I think it's the beginning of a trend. If the Republican Party is smart, and I think they are smart. I was part of something called Republican State Leadership Committee's Future Majority Caucus. And the point was to recruit minorities and Hispanics and African Americans and women to run for state office. If the party continues to do that, I think that it will make the Hispanic vote more important than ever, because it won't be automatically assumed that it's going to go to Democrats and there's going to be a jump ball. Both sides need to cater to the Hispanic voice, which is the largest growing minority vote in the country.
Well, there are a lot of Hispanics that have come to this country who are escaping governmental regimes that were somewhat, if not completely tyrannical. And I think it seems like they have a fondness for kind of more Republican philosophy of capitalism versus some variation of socialism. And then there are the cultural notes, right? That I think, those kind of dog whistles that are sometimes blown that really kind of blew the other way against Democrats this time, because that just didn't fit in Hispanic culture, especially people who are here, first generation people who are here.
You got it. I mean, my grandparents lost everything to communism. When Fidel Castro came to Cuba, slowly but surely, socialism and communism can't help themselves. They start taking private property, they start taking private businesses, and they start making it part of the government. And, that totally disincentivizes creativity and a desire to succeed. It takes away your willingness to work harder because you can make more. And it creates a society that's broken. We're seeing the effects of it now, where you have a Cuba that's totally dark. Its infrastructure system is totally collapsed. Mm-hmm. You have blackouts for days and weeks on end, and people are starving. And so I do think a lot of Latin Americans who have lost everything, really firmly hold on to democracy and fight for it in a way that when they hear certain policies being proposed by the left, whether it's Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders and some of the more extreme members of the progressive movement, there's shades there of something that they've seen before. They've seen this movie before and they don't like how it ends. So, rather than be a non-participatory character in the movie, they came out and they voted en masse. Yeah. And the numbers were staggering. I mean, people said, we want to reclaim democracy. We want to fight for democracy. And they were worried about, the direction that we're taking, not only as a country, but really in the hemisphere.
And we really saw this all across the country. So Miami-Dade or Florida in general is one shining example of that. But even in places where Kamala Harris prevailed, in California, there were dramatic gains for Republicans among Hispanics for the very reasons you're talking about. So my last question, How cool is it to be in Miami right now? Because it seems like suddenly the financial world has come there. The entertainment world is even deeper in its roots there. And of course, as you and I know, it's the gateway to Latin America.
It is the gateway to Latin America. And I think that COVID really showed the world that you no longer needed to live in a city to be successful. You didn't need to be in Silicon Valley to run a web company or an app. You could do that in the comfort of the greatest city on earth.
Well, you and Justin Safey put on a tech summit every year in Miami,
Yeah,
right?
we do. We own the Miami Tech Summit. It's been a resounding success. We've had great sponsorship from Google and Amazon and Ernst & Young. And every year we get more interest, more celebrities, more dignitaries. It's been fun, but everybody wants to be in Miami right now. The restaurant scene is second to none. I mean, I'll tell you, some of the greatest chefs on earth are descending upon Miami all at the same time. Art Basel is probably the most important event in Miami every year. Frankly, it's my favorite week to be in Miami, where there's a lot of great parties and the installations are out of this world. So it's the sexiest place on earth. I've seen such an influx of intelligence and capital and financiers, and it is a world-class place. And I think that we in Miami care so much about Latin America because Latin America impacts everything we do. I mean, we are dealing every day with the Venezuelan population and the Colombian population and the Cuban population and hearing their stories and their American dreams being realized in the city that is, the beacon of hope for all Latin Americans.
So what I get out of this, and for all of our listeners, if you need a restaurant reservation in Miami, call Pepe, right? Is this
Absolutely. Just
Right.
Give me some time. I need an appointment tonight at 7 p.m. Doesn't work for anybody. But if you want to come have a pastelito in Miami at Versailles, or you want to have some fresh mamey shake at Palacio de los Jugos, and you want to hang out with somebody that can give you a quick tour of Miami, reach out to me. My social media handles are all José Félix Díaz. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on X. Reach out, stay in touch, and let me know what you think of what we discussed and what we should be discussing at a future date.
Well, thanks for being on the show. Welcome to LA.
My brother, thank you, man. I'm so happy for you.
Can't wait to see you again in Miami.
You guys have knocked it out of the park, pun intended. And I'm so happy for you and your team.
Thank you.
The production that you're doing is really world class.
We appreciate it.